Negativity, criticism, no. What is the function, the evolutionary purpose of no in the polarity of the whole being cut into yes and no? Now, within general New Age theory and social convention, criticism, no, negativity is inferior, and positivity, unity, yes, is superior. Now, within the masculine-feminine balance, or yin and yang, we're not talking gender here, the yes is feminine and the no is masculine. We start off with the sphere. We start off with the undifferentiated whole. Because without any no, everything is interconnected. It's all one. It's unconscious. It's one. It's interconnected. And with yes in an unending, an undifferentiated form, there is no movement. When the circle is cut into two parts, the yes and the no, we create language. In Christian mythological terms, it's the knowledge of good and evil. Well, within a chauvinistic paradigm, the no is bad and the yes is good. The descent from heaven, from unity and ecology and oneness into hell, the consciousness of distinction, the consciousness of language. Because what is language? It is the process of labeling. This is a table and not a chair. This is a chair and not a table. If you don't have no, you don't have the cut, you don't have the distinction. You don't have words. You don't have thought. You could say that the journey into human consciousness begins with the word no, begins with the criticism of the status quo, begins with the rejection of some part of what is. And in that journey, we have consciousness. We have human consciousness. Even the most sacred New Age Buddhist yes to everything talks about how to be positive and Buddha-like here and not like that. How to be more Christian, more Muslim, and not like that. You cannot elevate anything without sublimating something in equal parts. The yes does not exist in a conscious framework without the no. The yes in an unconscious framework, the totality, the unity before distinction exists. But it does not exist in context, meaning it's pre-yes and pre-no. It is one. And all evolution, all development begins with the cut. It begins with the wound, the severing of the whole into parts. A wound is the line between an uninterrupted ecology A wound is the distinction between one individual and another, one race and another, one landmass and another, one mineral and another. The wound is the cut, and with that cut comes pain. With that pain comes distinction, comes awareness. Without no, without negativity, without criticism, there is no volition in human consciousness, because there is no thought in human consciousness. Without language, there is no thought in human in human consciousness. And without words, which is taking the vastness of the uninterrupted, interconnected ecology of the one and dividing it in a 64,000 word vocabulary, it is to cut the one into 64,000 slices, 64,000 wounds. The maturation process, as an infant begins to separate from its mother, is no. The terrible twos is the beginning of the differentiation process between one being and another. And it begins with no, with separation, with curiosity that leads to separation, with adventure, with distinction. And you do not get another unique life form, be it a company, an individual, a country, a cult, a system, a piece of software, a piece of art. You do not get a unique life form out of undifferentiated yes. The yes of unity becomes the no of rejection, becomes the no of protest, becomes the criticism of the status quo. And on the other side of that criticism, we have distinction, we have uniqueness, we have individuality. Now, the no, the rejection, the criticism can take us so far. I am separating myself from this, from this, from this, from this. I reject that and that and that. I say no to this and this and this. I am distinguishing myself from something. And in doing so, creating something unique. I am blocking part of the whole, and in doing so, creating something unique. Now, the question, as we move from the unconsciousness of the undifferentiated yes, the cult of the status quo, the question is, as we move from that to something that is distinct, that is unique, the question is what is uniquely created through no, through criticism, through rejection, through negativity, is it more or less intelligent than the status quo? Meaning, all systems within human consciousness exist on a continuum of intelligence. All systems consume a certain amount of time. In capitalist systems, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of attention, a certain amount of feeling, a certain amount of natural resources. This system consumes a 5,000 milliamp battery to power the phone, 200 watts of light, powered by coal, nuclear, a little sun. It's a system. It consumes natural resources. And the question is the yield. It's a unique system, meaning you've never heard these words in these order with these tones in these ways. So it's unique. The question is it more intelligent than the status quo, than the undifferentiated cult? And to answer that, we look at the spark, we look at the yield in sustainable well-being. All humans, all human consciousness is on an innate trajectory from high amounts of unnecessary pain and suffering that consume large amounts of energy to create high yields of chronic suffering, to a state of grace, a very efficient transformation of lower consumption of energy into higher yields of sustainable well-being. It's called grace. It's the movement between a line and a triangle and a square, an 8-sided shape, a 16-sided shape, a 32-sided shape. And as we move towards the circle, by cutting off the corners, by filling in the gaps, the journey becomes more and more graceful. The wheel, the circle, is the most graceful shape for transporting energy. And so we have wheels for our bicycles, our cars, our motorcycles, our propellers. We have a bowing to the revelation that the one, or the conscious symmetrical articulation of many, a geometric shape that symmetrically plays out 1,000 different spokes and dots, is more graceful than a geometric shape of 4 dots of a square, expressed in the bumpy ride of a square-wheeled bicycle and the graceful ride of a bicycle composed of a more complex symmetrical shape. So chauvinism is the protocol of elevating half of the world above the other half, which is unscientific. Because if you look closely, the one half cannot exist without the other half. Whether it's cutting a human body in half and trying to educate and teach half of a body without the other, whether it is bifurcating the education system and elevating thought with zero emotional literacy, you cannot cut an organism, and what else is there? You cannot cut a system, you cannot cut an ecology in half and have the one half function independent of the other. And if you cannot have the right side of the body without the left side of the body, it becomes absurd to elevate one side over the other. And yet we live in a cult. The difference between science and dogma is that it's not referencing data. We live in a cult that elevates half over the other half without acknowledging the scientific truth that if you cut a bicycle wheel in half and start driving on it, both collapse unless you use vast amounts of metal. And even if you gracefully curve around a half circle and then collapse on the flat line every revolution of a pedal, it's still profoundly inefficient. It's profoundly unintelligent to do so. The journey of evolution, therefore, is the journey of understanding the interconnected link of yes and no, honoring the bifurcation between them as the first step in human consciousness, and honoring the evolutionary journey that through no leads us to distinction, and through distinction to a probability field in which intelligent distinction and intelligent differentiation leads to a more graceful system, a more graceful model, a model higher on the intelligence continuum that consumes less energy to yield higher amounts of sustainable well-being. The question then is not, are you being negative? Are you being critical? But rather, what are you rejecting and what are you being critical of? That's the first question. And secondly, in the completion of the differentiation process, you cannot just say no to life. So the next part of the circle, having said no to what is to say yes to what could be. Meaning, it is an evolutionary pace. Saying no to what is leads in the next step to saying yes to what could be. Saying yes to what could be leads to further clarity about no of what parts of what is, because you cannot say no to everything, and you cannot say yes to everything. If you say yes to everything, you first of all have a paradox, because to say yes to everything is to say yes to no, which is part of everything. To say yes to going right and yes to going left simultaneously when there's a fork in the road is inconsistent with the distinction of one human body, which cannot be cut in half and sustained so that half of your body goes left and half of your body goes right. So no leads directly into yes, and yes leads directly into no. You cannot say no to everything, because that includes saying no to no, which is yes. You cannot say yes to everything, because that includes saying yes to no, which is part of what is. So rather, there's a pacing. Yes to this and no to that. Yes to this and no to that. And the question is that pacing going forward on the path of grace, on the path of sustainable well-being, or is it going backwards? With each differentiation, are we rejecting what is most conscious, what is most intelligent, what is most competent, what is most sophisticated and yields the highest amount of sustainable well-being? If we're saying yes to that and no to what is most unconscious, what is most crude, what is most reptilian, we are evolving energy. We are participating in evolution. If we say no to what is more beautiful, good, and true, more conscious, more intelligent, in order to say yes to what is more unconscious, more fearful, we are participating in devolution, the descent from grace into higher and higher levels of pain, fear, separation. And that's really the choice between the right and the left, the yes and the no.